Hello and welcome to Game Theory. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Keith Smith joins me because we want to talk about potential NBA contract extensions that could occur for the 2021 NBA draft class, as well as some of the stars and veterans that could occur over the course of the next 5-6 months or so. So keep it locked here and let's have fun. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Keith, what's going on, man?
Not a lot, Sam. I am so excited to be here with you. I love getting into the contract stuff. You know me, that's right in my wheelhouse. And but I gotta tell you, you have like the most fun podcast, like intro video around. I love it. It's just it brings me back to being a kid. With the VCR and everything. I love it so much.
Shout out Dave Krapinski, man. He did well with that thing. He did very, very well. But why you're here is we want to talk about contract extensions. But first, tell the people where they can find you and tell the people kind of what's going on with everything that you have your hand in, such as the front office show.
Sure, yeah. We'll start there. NBA front office show. Trevor Lane and I, we go right now. We're still in off season, so we're kind of 3 days a week or so. But once the season starts, we'll be every day, Monday through Friday. Every Friday is a live show right around midday Eastern, so right around lunchtime on the East Coast. We do a live show called Front Office Friday, where we take questions throughout the show, and it sometimes, like over the summer, it's not always the most basketball. Sometimes it gets a little crazy with movie talk and all kinds of silliness, but we have a lot of fun on those Fridays. And yeah, we're breaking down everything, a lot of contract talk, transactions, roster type stuff, all that sort of stuff. And that also is what I do over at Spotrac. I do all the a lot of covering of the NBA from a contractual roster type management over there. We just ran a couple of pieces I wrote about how all the cap space teams use their cap space this summer. I wrote a piece about how the roster building in the apron era, what does that look like? And now we're in a spot where we'll start pivoting eventually into more season type content, and then that'll go into trade pieces and all that. So, and then yes, obviously all of the numbers and all that at Spotrac as well. That's our bread and butter over there, is pulling all the contract data and sourcing all that, and having a lot of fun putting that together. And we're gonna have a couple hundred transactions here over the next month or so, with all the signing and waiving of G League affiliate guys and all that stuff. But we have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. So as people know, we often pull up the Spotrac numbers on this website onto just the screen here, because Keith does an amazing job at collating all of those and making sure that they are perfectly pristine. There's nobody better in the business doing contract work, doing any sort of CBA nerddom, whatever you want to talk about. Keith Smith has got it. More importantly, though, if you guys are talking movies, what is the last great movie that you have seen?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not like a cinephile. So like I struggle a little bit there when people ask me questions like that. Like, I'm a big Marvel guy. Because when I go to the movies or I watch a movie, I just want to turn off my brain for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So all that said, I loved Deadpool and Wolverine. It's the last movie I saw in the theaters, and I had a blast with it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I try not to take them overly serious. People get so worked up. What about the stakes? I don't know. I don't really care about the stakes. I just want to have fun at the movies for a couple hours and watch, people fight and things blow up. So yeah, I rather enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, it was fun. Like, I had a solid time. Like, I found it a little bit grating at times, and then at other times I was just like, this is amazing. Like, who wouldn't like be able to sit here and enjoy this, right? Yep. I will tell you one movie not to watch. I watched The Deliverance last night on Netflix, which is Lee Daniels' new movie starring Glenn Close and Andra Day. Holy shit, what a catastrophe of a movie. I have not seen a worse horror movie in a long time. Like the horror scenes are funny because I don't think he understands how to actually like use CGI in his movies. So they completely just looked hilarious whenever he tried to like do the funny scenes. Like there was a kid like climbing on the wall and it just looked completely unrealistic. It was one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. My goodness, we gotta get Andra Day, who is a fantastic actress, away from the Lee Daniels vortex. Okay, let's talk about contract extension. So the way that we're going to do this, I have 3 sections of the show basically lined up. So first, we're going to talk about the rookie class, the 2021 NBA draft class, or rookie scale guys, I guess is the way to put it. So that's going to be Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, Jalen Johnson, Trey Murphy, etc. Right? Then we're going to talk about the stars and some of the guys that could, in theory, consider doing contract extensions, but there are some questions on to whether or not that would actually make sense from a fiscal or financial perspective for the players, given the way that the salary cap is going to rise in the future. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the veterans that could actually look down the road of contract extensions this year. A big name that I'm sure Denver fans would love to see get under a contract extension is Aaron Gordon. We'll talk about him as well as a few other players. But that feels like the best way to kind of structure something like this is, there are a lot of different types of extensions that can occur. We're kind of talking rookie scale, stars, vets. Okay, let's start with the rookie scale guys. I think that the team that is most important to talk about in terms of what exactly it is that they're doing is Houston. Houston has both Alperen Sengun, the number 16 overall pick from 2021, and Jalen Green, the number 2 overall pick from 2021, as potential extension candidates until the first day of the NBA season here. Sengun is obviously the one of those 2 guys that has proven it more in terms of getting an extension. He was, somebody that wasn't quite all-star quality last year, but was probably one of the 20 to 25 best players in the Western Conference as a 21-year-old. Certainly, guys like that tend to just get auto max contract extensions. However, when you also have Jalen Green, who statistically, let's say, has put up well over 20 points per game at times throughout the course of his career, is coming off of a massive March where it looked like he took a leap this past season. There are some weird dynamics there that are probably worth discussing. There's also Houston's potential cap sheet, which Keith will be able to get into even more than I will be able to, and I'll let him explain that. Where do you think this situation sits? I guess let's just start with an overarching broad look at it.
Yeah, I think Sengun is the good one to start with for some of the reasons you mentioned, that he's the more established player. I think we know kind of what he is and where he's headed career trajectory wise. I think, to your point, he would normally be a no-brainer max guy. That's actually where I kind of projected him at. If I was writing that well before the offseason, I wrote my rookie scale projections, and I had him as a max extension guy. Now, see kind of the way the rest of the summer went, I understand why they're not there yet. So with him, without boring people to tears, I'll try to keep this not too many numbers, but he's got his cap holds a little over 16 million. So the easiest way I can explain that, think Tyrese Maxey and what the 76ers did this summer. It was, hey, we have this chance to use cap space. The only way we can do that is, can you hold off and not sign an extension? So Maxey waited a year ago, didn't sign an extension. Then this summer signed a full max deal. So I think what the Rockets are going to do with Sengun is, we're going to try to maximize our cap space. And if we can pull that off, we're going to take care of you, but we got to hold off a little bit. I've had some people push back that maybe isn't a full max guy. I kind of disagree. I think he probably is, especially the 25% of the cap max. I don't think there's a real worry of him being an all-NBA guy, so I'm not overly worried about that jumping into the 30% range. So I would give him that 25% of the cap max, but hold off, because then what that does is that allows you to have some cap space this offseason. So that's kind of, I think, where the Rockets' head is at with Alperen Sengun, because that makes a lot of sense to me to kind of try to get there. So, and I can tell you where I have them projected for next year. Right now, I have them at about 30 million in cap space. Now, if Jalen Green becomes kind of the big swing point in that. If you take Jalen Green, let's say Jalen Green just out of the mix entirely, that's going to jump up to well over 50 million in cap space. And they would be tops of the league, probably by a pretty good margin with that amount of money. And that's still with Sengun's relatively minor cap hold still on the books. So just a little bit of a kind of got to play a little bit here with the Rockets to really see where they're going to go.
Yeah. And to your point there about the cap hold situation, that's why I've always kind of wondered. I mean, look, this is the front office that Daryl Morey came from, and we just saw Daryl Morey execute this with Tyrese Maxey, as you said. I've always kind of wondered if a Jalen Green max at a level below his cap hold might actually be the more likely extension as opposed to the Sengun one. If only because, like you said, they have this potential to have max cap space next summer. Look, I think that Sengun certainly will get a max from somebody, right? My guess is that it will, in all likelihood, very, very strongly likely be Houston. But I wonder if there is some efficacy toward keeping, given how many prospects they have, given that you have Amen Thompson, you have Reed Shepherd, you have Jalen Green, you have now an option as a center in Steven Adams, as well as Jock Lawndale, who finished the season quite well, played well in the Olympics. I wonder if they look at it as just simply keeping their options open by not locking in on the Sengun deal now. Having said that, I think that's also why they probably aren't, racing toward doing a Jalen Green extension either. Jalen Green has had really last season had that great March, but up until that moment, there were plenty of games where he was not closing for the Houston Rockets. It was basically whether or not he had it going offensively that night or not. If he didn't, they were fine to not close with him. And that's not the kind of guy typically that gets a $30 million extension per season, which, given what Jordan Poole got, given what Tyler Hero got in terms of the comparable players that he could easily point to statistically and say, well, look, these guys got 30 million. Why shouldn't I get 30 million? I don't know that we see those as great contracts right now necessarily, but that doesn't matter if you're a player, right? If you're a player, you're thinking, I'm as good as these guys. I should get paid like these guys. So I've always wondered, could they look at a smaller extension? Would Jalen Green be willing to take a smaller extension first and foremost? It's kind of why, to me, I would have probably moved Jalen Green this summer, seen what was available, and tried to kind of move forward from that relationship without knowing what was actually available on the table. I'm not going to sit here and say they made a mistake, but that probably would have been my strategy. But I wonder if, you could see something like if Jalen Green is willing to take $24 million a year or something like that. That's a deal that lowers the cap hold for next summer, obviously, creates just a little bit more cap space for them, continues to allow them a lot of optionality moving forward. Or if they just decide we're going to run this, we're going to see what it looks like in the future, we're going to move forward and kind of continue to keep our options open, given the number of stars and potential young stars that will be in the mix for in the future via the trade market, as well as the number of young potential stars we have on the roster. Do we just kind of roll this over and see what it looks like in a year's time?
Yeah, I think what's good for the Rockets is you have all that optionality, like you mentioned, because you have this great stockpile of young talent. I'm very high on almost all of their young guys. Then you have these veterans that just kind of fit. They're fine. And I think with Fred VanVleet, I've had a couple people say, you really think they're going to decline their team option on him? And my point on that has been, when asked, is they certainly should, because I think what you do with a guy like Fred VanVleet is, I think we're all kind of like, that's an overpay, but not a gross one, but it's an overpay to give him a max deal. But all right, hey, we gave you $80 million over the last 2 years. We still want you, but we don't want you at 44 million or what and change. We'd like you at 30 million. What do you think? Like, and we'll take care of you, after we do some other stuff, maybe even less money than that. I don't know. We'll see, where that all kind of comes together and where that goes. But they have with Thompson and Shepherd, it's very interesting because I think there is this sense of, well, we've kind of got the backcourt of right now of Van Vliet and Green. Then we have probably maybe our backcourt of the future of Thompson and Shepherd. It sounds so weird to say Green's not part of that because he's still so young, but like we could pivot away from him and say, hey, we'll go forward with Reed, Thompson, Van Vliet, and then we'll kind of figure out the fourth guy. And we'll as Van Vliet ages out, we'll replace him. We'll sort through that. We'll find the point guard that fits in or another combo guard and all that. And I think what you can do is you can look at a couple different ways. If you don't sign Jalen Green right now, if it's team friendly, like you said, yeah, get it done, go. Because then why not, right? Let's keep things moving if we can get him on a team friendly deal. Because if nothing else, I'm probably going to repeat this phrase several times. They'll always be tradable later. So we can figure that out. But if he's like,
that is one place I want to pause. What do you think a tradable contract looks like for Jalen Green if he continues to play at the level he's at now? And by tradable, I don't mean just like we can get off of it by attaching a first round pick, because like that's what it would take to move Jordan Poole right now, if not multiple first round picks. What do you think an actual number looks like for Jalen Green as the cap rises here, where it's like, okay, we can pay this guy X number of dollars and it's not catastrophic moving forward for us?
Yeah, I think probably in the range of about 25 million average annual value, or AAV. I think that's fair. That's about 10 million under max in the first year. I think because what becomes risky is if he's the Jalen Green who's inconsistent and he's just kind of out there chucking and not playing a ton of defense, that turns into somebody's going to look at that and be like, we're going to give this guy $40 million in a couple years. Like, what are we doing? Like, even as the cap goes up, I don't want any part of that, because let's look at the trouble teams have had. You mentioned two of them, Hero and Poole, but even look at a guy like Zach LaVine, who is far more established. And even there's been no real trade market for him. Now, there's injury concerns. He's a much older player, fully understanding all of that. But there's a sense of he's an offense first guy. And why do we need him at $40+ million? That's where with Jalen Green, if it's an average of 25, sure. That's probably fine, because it's crazy as this sounds, we're not far from 25 million being kind of that's fifth starter, good 6th, 7th man territory. And I think worst, Jalen Green's that level.
15% of the cap is what that would be about in the third or the second year of his deal. Right. Like something around that number. So it's to me, 15% is probably fairly movable. I don't know that you might not get a lot of value back from it, but Jordan Poole, for instance, in 2026, 27. So this year, Jordan Poole is making 22% of the cap, basically, right? And that's a high number. That's a number where I think we start to get into, this is difficult to move. This is a hard situation to get out of. The problem with Jalen Green is we don't know what he is yet in year 4. And that's why ultimately I think I'm okay with them just like not extending him and waiting and seeing what this looks like moving forward. And with Sengun, there's just very real reason to not extend him at the end of the day. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It makes total sense. And then like, here's the other thing too. We saw the market this summer. If there was one position this summer where you felt like we saw the market kind of drop out from like the bottom out from underneath it, that's the way you say that, I feel like it was the shooting guard position, like 100%. The non two-way shooting guard position, where we saw Gary Trent end up on a minimum. We saw Malik Beasley end up like on a 1-year, $5.8 million deal or whatever. We saw a number of those guys kind of get squeezed a little bit. And I wonder if there's just real reason to kind of play this out and just see, does anybody really want Jalen Green and take the best bet.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. And then where I was going with the optionality too is you don't extend him now. Let's see. What that March was, is that him now? Because if that's him,
Yeah.
great. I feel a lot better talking contract next summer. Because that's the thing I think that gets forgotten with the rookie scale guys. Just because you don't extend them doesn't mean it's over. You have two options then.
Yeah.
You can either re-sign them, or let's say Jalen Green is incredible this year. Let's say Jalen Green pushes for an all-star berth and he's amazing. The Rockets are really good. You still have match rights. You can still match anything if you can't get a deal done. So there's the rookie scale contract for me, outside of the guys who are on the minimum deals where they're restricted free agents. The team wields the hammer better in this situation than any other spot, because they have all the leverage. It is, we don't have to do anything. Teams could literally say, we're never signing a rookie scale extension. We'll take care of all of it after we've seen you play 4 complete seasons. Now they don't, because there's no reason to do that. And you want to get guys locked up, and guys want to be locked up. You also don't want to risk angering guys. And we're getting to the point where there's a handful of guys who might be like, you know what I'm going to do then? I'll sign the qualifying offer and you'll only have me for 1 more year and then I'm out of here. I'm taking off. And eventually someone's going to do it. And it'll be a big story when it happens, just because I believe everything will happen eventually. But my point with Jalen Green is, let's see what he is this year. Let's see, just as importantly, where are Thompson, Shepherd, and Van Vliet at? And if there's any question of Thompson's not quite there, or Shepherd needs more time, or whatever it is, and I'm not saying like beyond normal rookie stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, man, he's a 3-year guy instead of a 2-year guy, meaning ready to play. Then I think what we're looking at then is, all right, well, then Green becomes that much more important if he's ready. And then on the flip side, let's say Green is just not good and those guys pass him. Then it's all right, you know what? Good luck to you in free agency. We're moving on, and we'll find a sign and trade or something that is mutually beneficial. We'll figure that out. You just don't need to lock in today on guys you don't feel certain about with that, unless you're getting surplus team-friendly value on those contracts.
Yeah, and the Van Vliet situation is really important here, as you referenced. The fact that they have a player option on him, typically teams know
team option.
The team option. I'm sorry. They have a team option on him. Typically teams know going into that option date. I would imagine his option date is like June 29th or so.
Yeah,
like
it's got to either that or that's the latest it can be. So it'll be somewhere in that range.
Typically teams know if they're going to have use for their cap space before that date.
Yep. So
they could end up, I think it's very plausible they do end up opting into that team option and just having Fred VanVleet next year and, continuing to roll over a little bit. It becomes harder because then you might have Sengun on a max contract situation, which means that, their cap space will be diminished in a substantial way, but it just depends on what's available. It then just becomes that, hey, maybe we're looking more on the trade market as opposed to in free agency. You can use your cap space in multiple ways, right? Mm-hmm. So, okay, the next player I want to talk about, and this is really probably the last guy that we'll talk about semi in depth, but we'll go through a lot of guys here too. Jalen Suggs to me is the most interesting guy by far, because Jalen Suggs to me is already a better player than the Jordan Poole, Tyler Hero, Emmanuel Quickley group that have gotten paid immense amounts of money. He is one of the best defensive guards in the league, certainly in the top 5. He is growing and maturing offensively. We saw him shoot 39%, 40% from 3 this year. He's continuing to get better in ball screens, but they don't necessarily need him to be elite in ball screens because Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner are already there. This is by far the most fascinating extension negotiation to me, because I truly wonder who wields the leverage here, because from a comps perspective, the comps probably say that Jalen Suggs should get 22, 23 million, but we know that he's a drastically more valuable player than that, I truly don't know what to expect. Like, to me, like, I'm just giving him, whatever is necessary. Like, I'm not, giving him a max, but like, I'm probably going to be, my number is going to be higher probably than what other people's number is in terms of what I'm willing to do in order to get him under contract, because I see him as maybe not the next Drew Holiday, but like somebody in that mold that just really helps me win basketball games through his presence.
Yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't make for as interesting of a show, but I'm in complete agreement with you on this one. I'm not going to counter anything on Suggs. I think the challenge in years 1 and 2 for Jalen Suggs was every time it looked like he was kind of figuring it out, he got hurt. And then he was out for a couple of weeks at the most. And then it was like, we're starting all over again. It all kind of clicked for him last year. I always defer to the idea that when it comes to a potential injury situation, no one knows better than the team because they've got all the information. And that's not information we have. So we have to be really kind of, if there's something weird with this one and you start to hear about it, I'm going to trust the team with that one. And yes, I'm putting my faith in the team that is shepherd Jonathan Isaac through multiple missed seasons and other stuff. I fully understand that. I think with the Magic, there's much like we talked about with the Rockets. They're already in a little bit of a different place just because they're about a year ahead of the Rockets on some of this stuff. They've already got Franz Wagner now on a max deal locked in. You have Caldwell Pope, but Caldwell Pope's contract's only 3 years. It's not a 4 or 5 year deal. So they could be, he may be there for 2 years and gone for all we know. But we know they're going to have Paolo Banchero on a max deal that they'll sign next offseason. They'll start a year later. So the question becomes, where can we go? Can we afford Suggs on anything close to a max deal and then still build a viable roster behind him, Franz, and Paolo? I think you can get really close because the rest of their books are really pretty clean. You have a lot of guys that are either on very fair contracts, short contracts, or team protected contracts, meaning they can get out of them with relative ease. Or in the Magic's case, it's often a combination of 1, 2, or all 3 of those things. They're really, books are in fantastic shape where it's kind of Franz is the only true long-term money that is sizable on their books, because the next one would be Jonathan Isaac, but the last few years are partial and non-guaranteed that the team has some level of control over. So for all of that with Suggs, I would say I would give him 25, 30 million AAV without question and just run with it, because I think he's, like you mentioned, he's already one of the best defensive guards in the league. He is not at all, he doesn't take away from Paolo and Franz, who they want clearly to have the ball in their hands. They did not sign a point guard this summer when they could have, because they want those 2 guys being the ones who key the offense. He knows how to play alongside them. He's a guy I feel really good about giving a lot of money to for all of those reasons. Plus, there is the upside that if one of those 2 guys is out, or for some reason one of them's not part of the future, I think Suggs can take more on his plate as a playmaker. I think he'll build into a player like that. And then just for anybody wondering with the shooting, yeah, let's see. Was that real, or is that kind of high end? But it's something like, let me get it right. 47, 40, 76 shooting splits. That's pretty good. I feel really good about that. Maybe 40 might be a little higher, but I don't think he's going to dip much below like 37 or so. And even that would be pretty good given everything else he puts on the table.
Yeah. So for instance, here in terms of Suggs, Brian K in the YouTube comments, shout out to people on YouTube. Go subscribe over on YouTube, by the way. Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie. He says Suggs will never crack top 40 players, but I bet he cracks top 60. His archetype is very valuable. So what I would say is that he was 42nd last year in estimated wins added, according to the EPM model. Like, look, I don't think I would say he's a top 40 player in the league by any stretch. Like, I'm probably like the biggest Jalen Suggs fan that you will find. And I don't think I would say that even still, but the numbers say that he's already like damn near that level in terms of value. again, the offense I think needs to come along. I think he needs to get his footwork down in ball screens. I think he needs to continue to kind of work through not just the decision making in terms of turnovers, but just being able to kind of slow down. It feels like he's always so sped up. He's always trying to, get them really moving in transition. So when I watch him, I think that you can get guys to slow down. Like, I think that you can kind of teach those players what you need to in order to, especially when they've shown growth already in the way that he has in his third season. I would have no problem really giving him 30 million. I understand that, that might not be super popular, but like, I think he's a better player than like the Devin Vassell group. Honestly, like, so Jaden McDaniels to me is probably the comp.
Yep.
Here,
That's
right?
it. That's exactly where I go. Different positions, but very similar roles.
Yeah, like different position insofar as Jaden is much bigger, but honestly, Jalen has shown more offensively than Jaden has at this point in his career. I kind of would default to that number, maybe a little bit higher, given the way that we know the salary cap is going to inflate over the course of the next few years, as opposed to when McDaniels did his deal. We had some questions, not many, but we had some questions on where exactly it was going to move up to. So look, I think this is easy. I think you extend them. I think it just looks like something like 4 years, 120, and maybe you try to get some protections in there in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, this one just feels kind of easy to me.
Yeah, I would not even kill the Magic if it was like that's just not getting it done. If they did like a modified version of what I now call the Desmond Bain, which is it's a max, and I'm putting that in quotations for anyone just listening, where it is a max deal, but there are incentives to get there. It maybe you make the incentives based around the shooting percentage, right? You have to take X amount of threes per game and you have to make X amount of threes per game. That was very famously the Spurs did that in Derek White's contract. That was one of his things. And I don't know that anybody ever thought he was going to make them, but guess what he did? The last couple of years, he hit those markers.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you could kind of go with Jalen Suggs is if you needed to plus it up a little bit. Yeah, 30 is the base, but we could get you a little bit more, right? We can, you're limited in how much of a contract can be incentives. So it can't be like you can get 10 million more, but it could be like, hey, you can get a few million more if you hit these markers. I think you could, build something there that becomes very reasonable. And then if he's hitting them, you feel even better about paying it out. It's like a bunch of people said, why did they put the all NBA stuff in Franz's deal? Is Franz even going to make all NBA? And if he does, then you have to pay him more, but you're paying an all NBA player. So then you feel fine about it. You don't have, I rarely have any issue with putting those in the rookie scale extension. The veteran extension, I get a little more queasy about because then he may have one more all NBA year in him. He may not have 4. Then the years 2 through 5 could get real messy. But off a rookie scale, I'm like, oh, you made all NBA when you're 22? Awesome. Let's go. I'm happy to give you 30% of the cap.
3 wings in really interesting situations. Jalen Johnson, Trey Murphy, Jonathan Kuminga. Kind of 3 drastically different situations, I would argue, where Kuminga is almost stepping into being like the number 2 offensive option this year, potentially for Golden State. Jalen Johnson, honestly, like seems like their number 2 guy that they're building around, at least in Atlanta, behind Trae Young. Could even potentially make the case that if he signs an extension, would be the guy that they're most connected to as an organization, looking at him as a potential star player. And then finally, Trey Murphy, a guy that every single time he's gotten more opportunity has showed, oh no, I'm capable of more. I'm capable of more. I'm capable of more. I'm truly fascinated to see where these deals go. Jalen, a guy that has had really 1 year of play that has shown that he is worth like a significant, substantial amount of money into the 9 figures. Kuminga, I would say also has frankly, maybe not even had a year fully where he's been worth 9 figures. And then Trey Murphy maybe has been the most consistent out of that group, right? Let's start here. how would you rank these three players in terms of what you would offer them in terms of salary?
Yeah, so this has actually changed since I wrote about them before the offseason because I spent more time looking into Jonathan Kuminga when I thought he might be traded. And one of the things that really excited me about him this past year was felt like he kind of improved in every phase of the game. He was far better defensively than he's ever been. I thought he was just he it seemed like it all kind of clicked for him. And then where the places where he's getting by with the athleticism, it was now I'm already there because now I know what I'm doing, and now I can really make my athleticism work. I thought as a shooter, he improved in all ways. I thought his pull-up jumper looked pretty solid. His standstill spot-up stuff was pretty good. He didn't do a ton of like off the catch, off the move shots, but there's just a lot there with him. So I would have him now the highest. Then I'd have Trey Murphy second, but that's just because I believe in Trey Murphy that much. And then I would have Jalen Johnson third. But how I think it's actually going to go is the absolute opposite way. I think Jalen Johnson's going to get the most if they are to all extend. Let me be very clear about that. Because if this goes into free agency next summer, I don't really know how that'll go. But if they all extend, I think Jalen Johnson would get the most. Murphy would get the second most. And I just kind of don't see Kuminga extending because I think it's going to be too hard for him and the Warriors to come to a number that they both feel good about.
I think that's right with Kuminga. That's kind of where I'm struggling with is like, okay, what do we think actually happens here? Because they are trying to filter what do we actually have here surrounding Steph and Draymond right now. And really like, look, they were pretty ruthless this summer. They were willing to get rid of Clay. I would be interested to see how they feel about Draymond and how connected they feel to Draymond if push really came to shove. Obviously, Draymond is going to be there. He is, to me, one of like I've said very publicly that I think he should be like in the NBA 75 as like one of the most important 75 players in league history with the way that he's changed defense, with the way that he's been a piece of all of these title teams in Golden State. I think the world of Draymond Green. I certainly don't mean to disparage him in any way, but except in the moments where he deserves some criticism, which occur a little bit too often. But I think I would rank those guys. I like Jalen a little bit more than Kuminga because I like the passing and the ability to kind of get up and down and create a little bit more. I think I would rank them Johnson 1, Murphy 2, Kuminga 3. In terms of like upside and star power, I think I would say Johnson 1, Kuminga 2, Murphy 3. In terms of, I just believe in this dude to be a good player on winning teams, I would have like Murphy 1 as like the guy that I have like real confidence and like certainty in. And then Johnson 2, and really honestly, I might have Kuminga 2, Johnson 3, if only because we've seen Kuminga at least be a piece of good teams, and we haven't really seen that yet from Jalen Johnson. With Jalen, it's like a bet on tools, right? Like you see this guy who's 6'8", 6'9", who can dribble, pass, and really needs to improve the shot, really needs to get to a point where he can make pull-ups. But it's hard to find like the combination of basketball mind and athleticism that Jalen Johnson has. And then with Kuminga, it's like pure force and athleticism and downhill driving and cutting and like a perfect kind of fit, honestly, in that Golden State scheme to be able to diminish his question marks as a player, right? Where he's not asked to, break down guys off the bounce and, consistently get, separation one-on-one in ISO situations. He get him on the move. They get him out in transition. They have him back cut. They have him, create offense in so many different ways. But Murphy, we know that he can shoot at a super high level. He's a solid defender. I think he gets like a little bit overrated when people start throwing him into like, hey, this guy's like a really, really good defender who's 6'9" and is like super switchable, but he's a solid defender who can already shoot the ball at an elite level clip. And oh, by the way, anytime that they give him the ball and say like, hey, like we need you to create out of a ball screen. We need you to kind of, run a second side action real quick. He can do that stuff too. So I kind of wonder. I think that Murphy is the one that is actually. I think Johnson's probably the one that's most likely to get extended out of this group, if only because they feel so connected to him organizationally and they're moving forward with him. But if I'm New Orleans, like I'm definitely extending Trey Murphy, and I'm giving him, again, if I'm Trey Murphy's representation, I'm looking at the Jaden McDaniels deal and saying, hey, like this is the number I want. I'm looking at the Devin Vassell deal and saying, hey, this is the number that I want. Give me like a touch more than that. The Vassell deal was what? It was like 120,
125, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I'm, Trey Murphy's people, I'm saying I want 130 or
Yep.
I want, 110 or whatever it would be. And that's what I'm willing to do.
Yeah, Vassell was 135. Just to close the book on that one. And there's a funky structure in there where it starts high, goes down, and then comes back up because they were kind of timing it out with when Wemby will hit free agency. So with everything you said, I think it's important to know too. Some of this is where the player plus team situation is so important. Because with Kuminga, Warriors just got out of cap mess for you. Not mess. Mess is not the right way because they were very good. But just they got out of being extremely wildly expensive just now.
Yeah.
Klay Thompson's gone. That one hurts. I'm not going to say losing Chris Paul, the player, hurts because I don't know how super attached they were to him as a player, but Chris Paul, the salary slot is like, now we're down that too. And they're just resetting. And I don't know how quickly they want to be like, hey, let's jump right back in with $45 million a year for Jonathan Kuminga. On the flip side, I think Kuminga's agent is like, hey, Steph's getting older. Draymond's getting older. I'm the guy who may be here after them. I don't want to be the guy who's here after them, nor do you want me the guy after them on a contract that maybe isn't super extendable. Because even with the improved veteran extension numbers, you don't want me at $25 million a year. It's not going to be enough to extend me off of. You want me at a higher number. So that's where I think that's a little bit of a play that we don't generally see come from a guy in that spot. Then with Murphy, the Pelicans' whole situation is just, I don't know what they're going to do. Because if you look at it right now, you can make a credible case that neither Murphy or Herb Jones is going to start for the Pelicans. They have 6 guys, in my opinion, that all should be starting. And it's the top 6 guys on the sheet there. Zion, Ingram, McCollum, Murray, Jones, and Murphy. Also, none of them are a center. None of them can even really cosplay as a center. So 2 of them have to go to the bench. I get it. Ingram may not be there. We'll see. But he's there today. And that becomes the tricky part. I would hope that in a couple years, CJ McCollum's transitioning into maybe he starts, but it's kind of one of those he starts, but he's really 15-minute, 20-minute a night starter. We get him out of there early. Or maybe CJ McCollum could extend his career by 2 or 3 years if it's, hey, I'm a 20-minute a night Eric Gordon type off your bench. I'll fill it up and I'll score and I'll be Eric Gordon, Jordan Clarkson, Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford. I can do that for the last couple of years. But I would want, if I'm re-signing Murphy, I want to go in saying, yeah, my starting wings are Murphy and Jones moving forward. And I feel really good about those guys with Zion, with Murray as my point guard. And then I'll figure out the center position, or that's Missy figures it out and develops, or we just acquire somebody in the Ingram deal or whatever. But as it stands right now, it's super messy. And it's important to note, this is a team that's never, ever paid the luxury tax. So you can't just start throwing another 30+ million guy in there when you have Zion, McCollum, and Murray all at 30 million already. It starts to get really, really tricky because then it's, all right, well, now we're just filling out with all minimum guys. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe it isn't. But I would assume whoever you trade Ingram for, if you do, that's a long-term guy. You're bringing in somebody there. And the last thing I'll just say real quick. You want to pause there? That's fine.
Let's hit the pause on Murphy real quick, and then we'll move to Johnson. The thing that is so interesting to me about the Pelicans deal is A, exactly what you said, but B, Ingram is an unrestricted free agent next summer, right? And I've kind of been wondering over the last little while because they have like kind of flagged publicly through reporting that they're interested in re-signing Ingram, just not at his max number, right? I'm kind of wondering, like, is that like a weird ploy to try and like create leverage against Trey
Yeah.
Murphy, maybe? Like, hey, if you resign, at a number that's a little bit lesser, we'll move Ingram, otherwise, like, we're going to try and resign Brandon at a number that, is right around 40 million. Like, the leverage dynamics there are so interesting. And we're going to talk about like the craziest leverage dynamic in the league to me next, because I'm truly fascinated by that one. But the way that the team can actually like implement leverage here is fascinating, given that they have, as you referenced really smartly, these 6 guys here that are all perimeter players that all are frankly top 75 players in the league. I don't know about what the exact number is, but they're all really good and all should certainly be starting, and all are probably, borderline top half of the league starters. How do you kind of wield that leverage to say like, hey, we're going to give you the playing time that's commensurate with that, versus the player coming back and saying like, well, I've got some questions on what the playing time situation is here?
Yeah, because if I'm Troy Murphy or I always do that. I always call him Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. My question is going to be, it's all well and good to say, hey, you're going to come off the bench and make the most of it and all that. What are we looking at and being like, yeah, until you want to pay me like a guy coming off the bench. And Herb Jones is kind of in that spot now because he just is, right? That's just where he was at because he was coming off one of those really tough, essentially minimum second round rookie deals. So he didn't have a lot of leverage. They paid him a year early too. So he's locked in. But if I'm Murphy, I'm going to be like, yeah, but then are you going to try to tell me in negotiations, hey, you're coming off the bench, so I got to go here? And if I'm Murphy too, I'm thinking about, hey, remember those times when Zion was out and I actually played a lot at the 4 and I showed you I can play 2, 3, 4, plug me in wherever, and I'm just going to kind of do my thing? Who says Zion's going to play 70 plus games again next year? What does that look like? So that gets to be, that's the combination. That's like that intersection of player situation. And that's, I always think about it first is, what would I pay this guy independent of everything else? And I try to get to a number that feels good for me. Then I kind of work backwards into what is the team situation, because sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes the player is so good, I'm giving them a max deal and it doesn't matter. And then there's other times I'm like, all right, well, what is our situation? What does this look like? Excuse me. And then Jalen Johnson.
Yeah.
I just think the Hawks have proven year over year, they're going to do what it takes to re-sign their guys. They just almost always do. And some of them haven't worked out so great, right? The DeAndre Hunter contract doesn't look very good. I know a lot of people said, are they going to re-sign Johnson? They have Zachary Risashe. Well, everything I'm hearing is, and I'm curious if you have heard the same thing. They're like, we're kind of viewing the 2, 3, and maybe even the 4 is all kind of interchangeable for us. We kind of play them all together.
Kind of what I was told was that they're envisioning like, either surrounding Trey or, maybe in the future, if Trey is not on the team, and I'm not saying that they're looking to move him, I'm saying that like they're setting up their roster in a way where they really are valuing a lot of positional size.
Yeah.
And they like the idea of playing Risashe with Jalen Johnson moving forward. And they see those two as being, really good complements to one another, where Jalen is this dynamic athlete out in transition, who's like a playmaker. And then Risashe is, your really solid wing who can, play really solid help defense and can knock down shots from the perimeter, and hopefully has a little bit more in his bag offensively as he continues to grow and mature and his frame fills out. But, I think they're envisioning it totally as these guys can play together, not as, that they're duplicative of one another.
Yeah. And so now you do that. And then with Johnson, when I think about Johnson going into last season, I was like, he kind of seems like an undersized 4. Like that was kind of where I had slotted him a little bit after his first. Really, it was the first year he didn't play very much. It was that second year he played in like 70 games or so, and he was pretty good. in moments, but it's like he can finish around the rim, but his shooting's a little shaky, doesn't offer a whole lot with the ball in his hands. Then this year, pre-injury, and he was not bad after the injury, but pre-injury, I was blown away. I was like, this guy is most improved player. I don't even think it's close. I know some people have feelings about anybody ever winning that in their first 3-4 years in the league. But I was like, this guy looked like, yeah, maybe he'll be a career backup forward to, hey, wait a minute, this guy could be a building block. And what really blew me away was the on-ball ability. Not only get his own shot, but his creation for others was so improved. And it was like, it reminded me almost when you're like, oh, he saw it. Like we saw the pass, but he saw it too through traffic, or he watched the play open up and he held it that second, extra half second, didn't get excited and throw it too early. Like all of those little things just seem to click. And then you had the things that are just easier to see, like the finishing was still good. He shot it really well. And I thought his defense improved. I don't know that I'm ever going to be like, wow, Jalen Johnson's defense, but he's passable. He's good enough. I think he'll be fine on that end, where I was really like, man, this is a guy. Now I had kind of locked it in when I wrote before. I wrote 5 for 125. And I had people the day that came out were like, you're too low. Like he's going to get more than that. When it actually comes down there, go back and actually watch a little bit more. And it was funny because then I had people say, go back and really watch as a group, the 3 guys we talked about and Franz Wagner, and then come back and tell me you feel like Jalen Johnson is that far off a couple of those other guys. And they weren't fully wrong. The problem was it's like this much of a track record compared to the other guys who are like this much. That was my whole thing.
And to me, like a big piece of this is betting on the Franz shooting like positive regression, right? Yeah. If Franz is not going to shoot it, then that's one thing. But like, if we think he gets back to the level where he's been for the last, 3 years, basically 2 years prior to this one, and then the one at Michigan, like I think Franz is pretty drastically better personally. But I think that deal's fine. Yeah. Look, I'm expecting Jalen Johnson's going to get like, 4 125, 150. Like I think it's going to be like a big number. And I'm not going to be surprised in any way when that happens. The crazy leverage situation I want to talk about is Josh Giddey, because everyone's assuming, I feel like, that Josh Giddey is just going to get like a large amount of money from the Chicago Bulls. Is that kind of where you're at on this, given that they traded Alex Caruso for him?
Nope. One, not to be a complete jerk about it, but I don't necessarily trust their trade logic on things generally in Chicago. So I normally, if this was another team, I would probably be in the same, more of that boat of they give up a really valuable player and they're getting somebody back. But I am more of the, let's see what this looks like, because holy crap, as currently constructed today on the day we record this in the middle of September, there's a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands on that team. And I have no idea how that's going to go for Josh Giddey. I've had people say, well, Oklahoma City had a lot of guys who needed the ball in their hands. Not like this. This is like a whole other thing. And in Oklahoma City, things were very like, there was a hierarchy. Here, I don't know what this hierarchy is anymore, because not much about this team makes a whole lot of sense.
And that is what they can leverage. And that's what I'm fascinated to find out about. Because if you're Josh Giddey, you're a player that I think actually needs the ball in his hands to thrive. You're somebody who like needs to be able to play point guard, to be able to, continue to bring the ball up the court, because you are not a great shooter. He got better as a shooter throughout the course of his time in Oklahoma City. And I think that went like a little bit underrated, but he's not an awesome defender. I think that is very real. And while he's developing as a shooter, you don't want him without the ball. And this is a contract year right now. So in this contract year, Chicago has the ability right now to really squeeze him. If they would want to, they could go to him and say like, look, hey, sign this deal for 4 years, 70 million or something like that, which based on like the comps statistically of Josh Giddey is like not in the ballpark. Right. And we can all, talk about like how good we think Josh Giddey is, whatever, but Josh Giddey is a guy that is 21 years old, who has averaged 14 points, 7.3 rebounds, 5.7 assists versus 2.6 turnovers throughout the course of his career so far. those numbers are awesome for a guy who has done that at 21 years old over the course of 3 full seasons now.
Yeah.
If you're Chicago, you can come to him and say, well, you know what? If you sign this extension, you're our guy. Like we're building around you. We're going to give you the ball. We're going to say, go. If you don't sign this extension, we have Kobe White. We're going to put the ball in his hands. We love Kobe White. We're trying to move Zach LaVine. We're definitely going to put the ball in his hands so he can prove what he can do. And then if you're Josh Giddey, you're kind of like left out in the cold a little bit, right? I'm like, but then also if you're the Giddey side and his representation, you're saying you just gave up Alex Caruso, who's one of the best role players in the league, who was a guy that you refused really to talk about at the deadline with teams up until, the moment of the deadline. And you're going to tell us that like, you're willing to lose that value off of your roster for nothing if we were to leave in the summer, or if we were to go get like a crazy offer sheet or whatever. He's one where like, I feel like Giddey's representation has to go out and like really do the work right now and see what the market is. Because if the market says, hey, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like needy teams that could have space, like the Nets just need talent, right?
Yes.
Or the Spurs like could potentially like have a point guard need long-term, right? There are teams out there. You need to find out, are they willing to give him a max this summer, or are they willing to give him $30 million? Are they willing to do whatever? And if they are, then you kind of win the leverage back from Chicago, right? If they aren't, then you're kind of in a situation where you might have to take a deal that's like a little bit lesser than what is expected. And also, like, let's just be real about this. Teams don't like dealing with Chicago. Agents don't like dealing with Chicago. It's not super easy by and large. So like this front office doesn't make anything easy for anybody. So it's fascinating across the board, just wherever you want to go with that.
No, you're on it. And I would even add in Lonzo Ball's going to play. They're going to give him reps. I don't know how long it'll last. I don't know what it'll look like, but everything out of there has been strictly for no other reason how hard he has worked to get back. They're going to give him some time. And just there's only a finite amount of possessions each game that everybody can touch the ball. And there's going to be a lot of plays where it's like, yeah, Josh Giddey's out there, but Josh Giddey's hanging out in the corner. He's not getting those corner crash cuts where SGA drives and dimes him up and he gets a layup. Because the Bulls playmakers, just Lonzo will be, but we don't know what to expect out of him. LaVine's a score first guy. I love what Kobe White has grown into. I think he's really improving as a creator, but he's a score first guy. Then you have Pat Williams isn't setting you up. Vooch is a good passer, but I don't even know what's going to happen there. The big questions that I would be asking internally and from the Giddey side is, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to chase getting back into the play-in tournament in the 8th seed as quick as possible? Or are we really saying, all right, clear out LaVine, clear out Vucevic, we're starting over? Because if I'm saying that maybe should where am I at with Giddey? It sounds odd to say it, but in some ways, if I'm like starting over, I might feel even better about let's sign him. Because then if I'm starting over, it doesn't matter if the contract goes a little sour. It'll run out by the time we know what we are. If I'm not starting over, if I'm trying to be good again, I might be like, I don't know that I want to lock him into a deal that turns into our next bad contract. I want to be very careful with that. So it's a little bit of a weird place with Chicago. And like Bulls fans are like, it's been a weird place for the last decade. Like you talk about 2 decades. But it is like, it's to me, it's you. It sounds weird to say it this way, but I really kind of think with Giddey, it's either you got to commit to him or he should be gone by the trade deadline and he shouldn't even be messing around. Like, I don't know that there's an in-between there where it's, let's just kind of see how the season goes and figure it out. Because I think there's a good chance he averages close to a triple-double this year.
I agree.
And then it's going to be, hey, he averages a triple-double. And no matter what you and I and every other reasonably smart basketball person feels like, yeah, but it's not real. that becomes a selling point. That's still real to an awful lot of people. And it's going to be, you better pay him. He averages triple double. Where are we going to go? I've been telling everybody, I give very little fantasy basketball advice because I'm awful at it. Go get Josh Giddey because he's going to fill up the stat line for you every single night.
Yeah. Like, again, if they're willing to like put the ball in his hands, he's going to average 19 or 18, 9 assists and like 8 rebounds.
Yep.
Like that's real. If he has any opportunity, he is just capable of kind of imprinting his mark on the game in that way. So look, I'm truly fascinated with everything Josh Giddey at this point, because I am still like a relative believer in the talent at the end of the day. I think he's a really gifted basketball mind, and I want to see where it goes here in Chicago. And I think there are so many different directions it could go. If I'm them, I don't think the price point's getting any cheaper than what it is now, though.
I agreed.
Like it's either you're keeping him and you should try and get him now. And, look, like, would you pay him for 100 if that's what it came down to?
Yeah, I probably would, just because
I would too.
Yeah, 25 million. That's not, I'm not going to stress about that. Like I
think I would too.
Yep. Yeah. We talked about that earlier, right? Kind of with Jalen Green. It's the same kind of conversation. 25 million. I can always move that without having to attach crazy stuff to get off that kind of money. And somebody else will see Josh Giddey and be like, you know what we need? We need a big playmaker. And we've got enough other guys that can handle the shooting. We're not worried about it. There'll always be someone that will buy into a 6. I don't know, what is he now? Like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is.
Yeah, he's big dude.
6 whatever. That's a good ball handler and good passer. And somebody will always buy into that and believe, we'll put 4 shooters around him and make it work.
Honestly, like I wonder if you could get to like 4-115 even. And like that's a big number, but I like, what else are you doing if you're Chicago? Yeah. Like he and Kobe White kind of work together. Ayo Dosunmu and he are intriguing as long as Ayo's shooting leap from late in the season continues. I'm intrigued. Okay. Rapid fire on some of these last guys here. Santi Aldama is in a really interesting spot, a really good player coming off an awesome Olympics for Spain. I am probably a bigger fan of Santi than most. Also, Memphis has like a fascinating cap sheet in and of itself. They have the Jaren Jackson Jr. contract that's going to have to come up at some point here. We will talk about him momentarily. They have Ja Morant signed to a max. They have Marcus Smart's deal for 2 more years. They obviously have Desmond Bane on the deal that you alluded to earlier. And they have Zach Edey now as their center of the future, when Santi has always struck me as a guy that probably works best as like that third big man in the Kelly Olynyk mold, maybe. I think that there's probably a deal that could be made here, but they also have Brandon Clark, who I know they're excited about coming back off of his injury, that he's kind of their third big man, and they've kind of already got that slot filled. Give me a reasonable number on Santi Aldama.
What I feel like would work is something, I don't know that he gets extended, but if I was going to extend him, I'd say something around 450 in that range, kind of similar to what Clark is. One for Memphis, I like kind of, let's stack a handful of those mid-range contracts, where if we need to put 2 or 3 of them together, we can do that, because none of these guys would be wildly overpaid. We can kind of go out and get whatever it is we need. So that feels pretty good to me, because I'm with you. I think if I go into a year, this year, next year, the year after, and my big man group is Edey, Jackson, Aldama, and Clark, I feel pretty good about that. I feel I'm set. That's now a spot I don't need to worry about. And if I really need to, I can move one of them if I need the forever wing that they've needed in Memphis. If I need one more small forward, like I've got somebody I could move on from there. So that's about what feels right to me.
450 to 460 feels right to me as well. The thing I would say on Aldama as well is this is something that's come up a lot when I've talked to agents, when I've talked to teams. Like the money, like that seems like a low percentage of the cap, right? Like we literally have a 450 deal on the screen in front of us right now with Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark's going to be making 8% of the salary cap in 2025-26, which is just like a very, very small amount for a player who, if Brandon Clark gets back from his injury, is worth much, much more than that. But the thing is, like, you have to think about it from the perspective of, like you said, teams wield all the value in this situation. And B, like, this is the chance for players to like make generational money.
Yep.
Like if Santi Aldama locks in a $60 million or $50 million deal plus the 12 he's made already or whatever, that's like $65 million over the course of his life. By the time he's like 28 years old, like he's good at that point. You know what I mean? So
then if it's not working out, just go back to Europe and you'll make 3-4 million a year in Europe and live the high life over there. And you can do it that way too. So yeah, absolutely.
totally.
Yeah.
Like guys like this, like I kind of wonder if we start to see them get squeezed, but also like just take the extension number at the end of the day, because it makes sense. The next guy here is Corey Kispert, right? Corey Kispert for the Washington Wizards, I think is quite good. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like he's at least like a fifth starter, sixth man kind of player. If you look at his numbers, he averaged 13 points per game, shooting 49, 38, 73 last year. The year before, 11 points per game, shooting 50, 42, 85. I think he's like a really effective offensive player. He's more athletic than he gets credit for, and can at least like manage some defensive matchups. He's not like a complete sieve on that end. He's not, don't get me wrong. Like I'm not sitting here saying he's like some awesome defender, but he's okay. I kind of think that this is like a 470-ish. Like if I'm him, I'm probably looking at and this is the same agency that did the Kevin Huerter deal. Like I'm probably looking at like a Kevin Huerter-ish kind of contract when he signed with the Hawks a few years ago. So, 470-ish sounds right to me.
Yeah. And I would say Washington, they were really good and creative with the Denny Avdija deal last year.
Yeah.
On similar time frame, late in the off season. The deal that I know I was like, wow, I kind of like this right off the jump, and really aged well. You could look at something maybe a little bit more for Kispert, but I think one thing with Kispert too is kind of like you said, I think people see him and he gets tagged with the white shooter tag. But he's actually pretty good off like with the ball. Like he can do some stuff off the dribble. He's got good upper body strength. He's pretty good at kind of leaning into guys and creating that space to get a shot. He's not just a spot up guy who runs around. I think that's just a tag that guys get sometimes, like a lot of other guys do. But I think offensively he's that. Yeah, defensively he's not ever gonna be a big part of anything you're doing defensively. You're not gonna be like, well, here's our wing stopper. Like that's not gonna happen. But yeah, you give him 15, 16 million a year, you're fine. I think you're okay with a contract like that. And again, a team, I know it sounds a little crazy because they've got the Jordan Poole contract, but Poole's the only even semi-big money contract on the books because Kuzma's contract goes down year over year. So you can afford to put him on your books. And if you need to, you trade him like you did with Avdija. If a deal comes your way that you think makes sense, you can move a year from now. And at 15 million a year, everybody will be all over that. He's, for my money, he's at least equivalently as good. I'm just thinking of making up words now. As like a guy like Max Strus or Duncan Robinson, or when they were, really highly thought of guys. And that's like roughly the range they got paid in. So I'd have no problem giving him that.
So Kevin Huerter's first 3 years in the league, 11.2 points on 42, 38, 78 from the field. Corey Kispert's first 3 years, 10.9 points on 48, 39, 79. So, very, very, comparable numbers here. If I'm, his representation, I'm probably looking at like 480, honestly, is like my starting point, but would probably be willing to take like 470, 475 kind of deal. And, someone here asked, like, why would Washington pay Corey Kispert? Because having guys who can shoot is exceptionally valuable for rebuilds. Having guys who are excellent floor spacers, having guys who are able to like actually help facilitate the development of your young players. Look at Detroit the last few years. Like it's been impossible for Cade to have any space. It's really, really important. Zaire Williams, Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe. I mean, Cam Thomas is the big name there, but I'm not extending any. I might extend Day'Ron Sharpe if I'm being honest, because I think Day'Ron's kind of interesting, but I'm not extending Cam Thomas until I see what that looks like this year. Zaire Williams just hasn't shown enough, but I bring those all up because they all play for Brooklyn now, obviously. But I I mean, weird situations kind of abound there.
It's just a weird team. Daron Sharp, to me, that whole situation is tied to, did you sign Nick Claxton because you want Nick Claxton to be a really big part of whatever the next good Nets team is? Or did you sign Nick Claxton because the value was just too good to not do it? If it's the first, I'm probably going to let Daron Sharp go unless I get him on a really nice contract, because I already have Claxton and I want cap space next summer. Not because I'm looking to go make a huge splash, but I just want the flexibility of doing some stuff. I'll also say this too. I am super duper high on Noah Clowney. Barely played in the NBA last year, but what he did in the NBA plus the G League was promising. And then it's an even smaller sample size, and I'm trying very, very hard not to overreact to. He was really good in Summer League. And I think you could play him next to Nick Claxton because he can step out and shoot. And if that proves to be real, then I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I can just roll with those two guys for now. I don't need to do anything with Daron Sharp. Cam Thomas, he might score 25. He might score 30 points per game on this messy, goofy Nets team next year. He's certainly going to take as many shots as he wants to. And I don't think anybody's even going to attempt to stop him from doing it. But I don't know what that's going to mean. It's going to look weird when Cam Thomas averages 25 points per game and signs for like $20 million. I think people are going to be like, what? Like he was, third in the league in scoring. How? I don't know what to think of it. And it's, people keep getting mad when I say this. I think he might be more like a Jordan Clarkson type, where he's an okay starter for a few years, and then he's a really good six man. And there's nothing wrong with that. The guys I always use, Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford, built 20-year careers out of being incredible six men. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing negative about it. You could build an awesome career as Cam Thomas by being a bucket getter off a bench on good teams. And that's fine. And then Zaire Williams, forget it. There's no chance. He just hasn't been healthy enough to even consider it. I like the flyer for the Nets. I think this is Sean Marks repeating what he did in the wake of taking over with the kind of here's anything that's left from that Celtics deal. He's just going to start cycling through guys. And if two of them hit like Spencer Dinwiddie and Joe Harris did, great. Now we're good. We've got two nice role players as we build this thing forward. And if they don't, great. We're moving on. We're going on to the next group of guys. We're just going to be cycling through. And that's what Zaire Williams is to me right now. Even if I think there's a chance he maybe he hits, but I'm certainly not paying him anything right now.
Yeah. So real quick to cycle through some guys, Moses Moody, like to me, like if I'm Moses Moody, I'm not re-signing in Golden State just because like I want playing time. And I think I'm a player that's like actually pretty good. Isaiah Jackson in Indiana, like they have a weird center situation forthcoming with Miles Turner hitting free agency this summer. Or next summer. I'm sorry. Maybe for some insurance, but I'm probably not doing that if I'm Indiana.
Yeah, that one, these are the kind of ones that never, ever get done before. Like the Zeke Naji deal, where it was like 3 years, 30 million. It's a little bit less than that. But if you told me they did 3 years, 30 million on Isaiah Jackson, okay, sure. Why not? You're already locked in. You're not going to have cap space. You paid a bunch of other guys. That's fine value. Those rookie scale extensions never got done before. Because the guy was like, if you're not paying me like a tick or two below the max, I'll bet on myself and I'll go into free agency. If I'm Isaiah Jackson, his agent, I'm looking around and saying, the teams with cap space are not knocking on your door day one to come in and give you a whole bunch of it. We can get $10 million a year out of Indiana. Done. Let's go. Let's move. And they let Jalen Smith walk. So why not? Right. I like Isaiah Jackson. I think he kind of gives them something they don't get from their other guys. I thought in that Celtics series, he was the one guy who was willing to knock somebody on the floor and then kind of look at him.
Yeah.
They don't really have guys like that. You need at least one or two of those guys on your roster.
You might have sold me on this a little bit more than what I thought. Yeah. Given that they have like now extended McConnell, extended Obi, you have the Mathurin extension potentially coming if you want to retain him at some point.
Neesmith, Nembhard Halliburton, Siakam.
Guys
Yeah,
are in.
yeah. As long as it doesn't put what you can't do is let it get too silly, and then you're like, oh, well, we can't pay Miles Turner now because that's going to push us into the tax. Like then now you made a mistake, and that was a
So
problem. But they can get off contracts.
The tax is an issue there now that you say that, and they've never been a tax team.
No, yeah.
I would venture they probably don't do this because of the tax, but you're right that they are locked in, and if they're willing to pay the tax, this is one where maybe it does happen. Because again, like if you're Isaiah Jackson and you can say, hey, I've made $40 million through the first 7 years of my career, it's not a bad spot to be in, right?
Or maybe you lose like Neesmith because of it, and you're like, well, we're gonna have to. Someone's got to go, and we like Matherin enough that we can go with him, and you kind of go. There's different options I have.
Bones Highland, Trey Mann, Chris Duarte, Davion Mitchell. I don't see any of these guys.
No, same. I do like Trey Mann. I was happy to see him get minutes with the Hornets. I want to see what that looks like day one with a Hornet, and instead of a Hornets team that's like, who cares? Just go. Like I want to see, because he played pretty well for Charlotte last year. What does that look like? But there's not an extension coming for any of those guys. I mean, some of those guys, they're not. I think their teams are. If you bet on before the extension deadline, they get extended or they get traded. There's a couple of those guys that be like, they're a good candidate for a late summer trade here versus an extension.
Okay. The next section here is the stars, and this is going to be a little bit shorter. The stars that I want to talk about quickly, and I'll let you explain this. Why does it not make sense for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka Doncic, and I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that I think like really fits into this. Probably not right now, I would say, that level of star. Why does it not make sense for them to sign extensions, even though they're eligible to sign extensions?
Yeah, all you're doing is taking a little bit of money off the table by giving yourself shorter in years. And I've seen people say things like, but then you're back on the market earlier. Well, one, we can't just one of the single biggest mistakes I think people are making right now is that the cap's going to go up 10% in perpetuity. It is not. That will level off. I use everything in a 6-year window, mostly because that's the longest any contract can ever run, because you can have the final year of a deal, rookie deal, plus 5 years on an extension. So that's the window I use. By the time we're at the end of that 6-year window, we should be caught up from the TV contract, and it's no longer a lock that it'll go up 10% every year. I think we'll actually level back off into a much more reasonable 5-ish% per year. Still a lot of money. Yes, Victor Wembanyama, all things go the way they should. He's going to make $1 billion in salary at some point in his career. As crazy as that sounds, yes, that is going to happen. But for guys like Luka and Shai, it's just if you do it now, you're only adding, because they've got 3 years left. You're only even if in Luka's case, if he wipes out his player option, he could add 3 more years. That's not something guys do on the second non-rookie scale extension. So Luka did his rookie scale extension. That's something you may do then. This would be his first veteran extension. Guys let it play out, just like you saw with Jason Tatum. Tatum took it out, wiped out his player option, then did it. So Luka will play out this year under contract. Then next summer, he will wipe out that player option. He will add 5 new years at the max at, hundreds of, probably at that point, close to $300 million in total money. And that's where it'll be. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's in a slightly different case because he doesn't have a player option. I'm just double checking when his contract runs out. He runs the same length. He just didn't get the player option on his deal. Not uncommon. The player option on a rookie scale extension has traditionally been reserved for the guys who are already all NBA level guys when they signed it. So Tatum, Luka, they got them. SGA, as good as he wasn't there yet. Now he is, but it's the same kind of thing where I think he just lets it play out a couple years. Because the other thing you're hoping for is, hey, let's make another all-NBA team, and I qualify for the 35% max and can jump. Luka's already there. I think SGA needs 1 more year. Barring injury, I don't know how he doesn't make it. I think that's, we can very, very dark pencil him in, I guess, or maybe erasable pen him in as an all-NBA guy and just go. But yeah, so you're trying to maximize money and you're trying to maximize guaranteed money to you, not this theoretical. Because, yeah, the best way to do it in theory would be only ever sign 1-year deals and go 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, one. That's how you would make the most money. But nobody does that because everybody has to look at it at some point and be like, well, wait a minute, I blow up my knee tomorrow. I'm not getting the next 1-year deal after that, and after that, and after that. So everybody goes for the most guaranteed they can get. That's in part why those guys will wait and delay.
At what point, if Shai was to not sign an extension this summer, is that a point where Oklahoma City fans should worry? If Luka was to not sign an extension this next summer, is that a situation where Dallas fans should worry?
Next year, when they're actually eligible to add next year for Luka, the year after for SGA, because remember, he doesn't have that player option. Now, SGA could do what Jamal Murray did, and I think it's probably fairly likely that's what he does, and he just does the 4-year max, just because that kind of starts to align things a little better for him. But if we're a year from now and those guys haven't extended, red flags are going up for me and saying, what's going on here? Why are we here? I think with SGA, what we'd really be looking at is, all right, let me lock in all NBA this year. I'll get to 35%. Yeah, I can only do, 4 more years, but I'm going to add the 4 years and go. I'm on to my deal. And then if I'm Luka, I'm going to wipe, just like Tatum did, I'm going to wipe out my player option. I'm going to add 5 new years. And if that didn't happen, I'd be like, what is going on? I use Jalen Brown as the comp for this, where when he was 2 years out, he was eligible to extend. It's like, he's not gonna. It doesn't make sense for him. Bet on yourself. Try to get all NBA again. Try to really cash in on that money. But what I said was when it was really time for him to sign a year ago, if he doesn't sign now, and it got a little touch and go there, because remember, he didn't sign until later into July, which I think was also strategic for him was, hey, if I sign the veteran, the designated veteran, takes me off the trade market for a full year, I'll be out by free agency's done. So I think for Jalen Brown, what he really was smart there. But I said to Celtics fans, now he cannot get a dime more by waiting. Once you get to that point, if a guy's waiting, that's time to get nervous. That's when it's like, I don't know. But until that point, don't get nervous. It's just guys in their agency and honestly the teams all being pretty smart and reasonable about it.
Joel Embiid and Kevin Durant are slightly different situations to me because Joel Embiid obviously has the immense injury history. Kevin Durant is 36 years old already. Kevin Durant has 2 years and a player option remaining. Joel Embiid, I believe, also has 2 years and a player option remaining. Look, these guys can add, I believe, 2 years if they would want to, right?
I think Durant can only add a year because of the over 38
over
rule.
38, yeah.
But
right.
Durant has 2 years and then that's it. So he's got 2 years. He's basically in the same boat Stephen Curry was in, where he can add 1 more year, that. But then Embiid, he's in a slightly different place because he has that option that he can wipe out. And if I'm Embiid and the Sixers are like, hey, can we add a couple more years at the max on? Yeah, done. Sign it. Let's go. Move on.
And Joel's at a point where his option year is already $59 million. So there's no limitation really on what he's making because he was already at the over 35 or the 35% mark from being an all NBA player. So, look, if the Sixers want to add years, whatever, if they don't, I understand it because of the injury history. Next group of guys that's like kind of, in a strange position. De'Aaron Fox could add years. Trae Young could add years. Rudy Gobert is, maybe we'll save Gobert. And Jaren Jackson Jr. Let's throw in this one as well. Jaren's deal is not a max. His is slightly different. Jaren, could sign 3 more years if I remember correctly. And that would be at what number?
I'm going to do a little bit of math on the fly here. So I'm going to take out, which is maybe not entirely fair for him, not making like all NBA or defensive player of the year, because he certainly could win one of those, which I would vault him into the 35%. But let's say those things don't happen. His first year extension number, this is the challenge. So this is a really good one. I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah.
It sounds great to be like, holy cow, Jaren Jackson Jr. Declining contract, $23 million in his last year. I love it. right up until you need to extend him, because what he can go to is 32.8 million. That's with the improved veteran extension rules that allow him to get 140%. That's just a quick CBA aside that I don't like. They didn't go far enough in the veteran extension rules to fix them to make it really valuable for guys in this spot. It's fine for the guys at the upper levels. It doesn't really matter. Like you said with Joel Embiid, you're already there. You're already capped out. You're going to get your max. But a guy like Jackson, 23 million to 32 million versus, I can wait. I can play it out. And then I could get as much as what projects to be a starting salary. If someone wanted a maximum of $51 million, I'm waiting. I'm not going to sign that extension. And I don't know that there's any kind of, hey, let me give you a hometown, the Jalen Brunson, let me give you a real hometown discount here. And really, let's do this because we're building all this up. Last I checked, they don't have 17 Michigan State players on the roster that he's super thrilled about teaming up with. So it's just, I think he probably goes into free agency strictly because he can make so much more money. And that's the 51 million's a max. I would say Jaren Jackson Jr., as it stands right now, a couple more healthy seasons, he's a $40+ million a year player without a doubt. And that's considerably over the 32 that he could make by extending.
Sacramento with De'Aaron Fox next. I mean, De'Aaron Fox, 2 years remaining, 71 million, last season at $37 million. This is one where, like, to me, it kind of makes sense for everybody to extend here.
Maybe. I could see De'Aaron Fox saying, let me play out the year. Because if I make all NBA again, which he's been in range of, I want that 35%. Give me that. Give me the super max. You know,
do we think he's a 35% max guy?
Boy, he's
like that. That's the tricky part for me.
Is Jamal Murray?
No, not to me.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to have a hard time convincing you De'Aaron Fox probably is too. It's close. It's really, really close. Team factor coming in here. First year that DeMar DeRozan's probably playing out his last year, although who knows at this point with him. Gets a bonus on an air max. Malik Monk got paid. You're going to have to, Keegan Murray will be in the first year of whatever you extend him on that year. I wouldn't hate the idea of De'Aaron Fox going into his year 30 season on 35%, but it's like right there. And you have to be really careful because I don't know that you can, hey, we made the playoffs a year ago. Let's say they're in the playoffs, we're in the playoffs, and then, we messed around. But you can also wait if you're the Kings and say, hey, you make All-NBA 2 years in a row, we're happy to give you 35%. We move on. Because that's, you're good. But
that's the thing here. De'Aaron wields all the power here.
Oh, yeah.
He's 2 years away from unrestricted free agency.
Yep.
If he does make All-NBA, they don't really have an option to do anything other than pay him the 35% max.
Oh, the fans
would have
riot.
to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They absolutely have to do it because if they don't have him, they're kind of nowhere at this point.
Yep.
So you have to do it. So to your point, I think he is probably right to wait. But if he doesn't make it this year to All-NBA, I would say probably go sign your extension, get your money. Or if you want to like explore free agency, like you would be one of the top 2 or 3 free agents on the market at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it would make sense. That's one of the more interesting ones worth tracking, I think, league wide now is De'Aaron Fox. I mean, he holds an immense amount of power over that organization right now in a way that I don't know that a lot of people have kind of recognized as they kind of run through all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he is as close to a franchise guy as they've had in, I don't know, decades in Sacramento, because it took him a long time to find a guy, and he's been the guy, and he was a big part of, hey, we got there again. We got to the playoffs again, and I was a big part of it.
And the Kings have done everything to take care of him at this point, and he should be very happy with the situation there. They continue to build competitive basketball around him. He just holds all the cards right now if he wants them. And then Trae Young, I mean, Trae Young is extension eligible. I mean, I don't think they're going to move. I don't think that anybody wants to do that, I would guess, if only because like it seems like Atlanta, at least wants the option of considering moving him at some point.
Yeah. And If I'm Trae Young too, I'm good for the next couple of years. Let me see where we're at too. Because he's a guy I could see say, you know what, that player option in 26, 27, I'm going to decline that and see what free agency looks like. And maybe in a couple years, we'll have a couple teams with cap space and somebody who wants to build, or maybe it's I want to slide in and be the third best player on a really, really good team. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that it makes sense for everybody there to keep this status quo, basically.
Yeah, I don't want to lock in any more money.
The one that's strange to me that hasn't gotten done yet is Rudy Gobert. I kind of expected something to happen with Gobert this summer where they added years, either off of his player option or if they declined the player option and then added years off of that.
I'm with you.
Explain Rudy Gobert's situation to the people.
So you have a couple challenges here, right? You already have Karl Anthony Towns locked into big money. You have Anthony Edwards locked into big money. You have Jaden McDaniels locked into a nice contract. We talked about this on Front Office Show today. I don't know how many people realize Minnesota is the second most expensive team in the NBA this season, behind the Suns.
Yep.
Everybody thinks it's the Celtics. That's really next year when Tatum's deal kicks in and White's deal kicks in. This season, it's the Minnesota Timberwolves, which if we just pause there for a second, that just sounds wrong and crazy and not right. Like that seems like, holy crap, you blew everything and you signed all the wrong guys and this franchise will be a mess forever. But they're actually good because they signed the right guys this time around. They just signed all of them. So with Rudy Gobert, there's two parts here. I have to wonder, does Rudy Gobert fully recognize I'm good, but I'm not an all-star anymore, probably. And I'm no longer definitely in the top 3 for defensive player of the year. That's starting to slide a little. I'm still maybe an all defense level center, but I'm not there. So if he doesn't get that, well, he's looking at it and saying, I want my $40+ million. Like, why not? Karl Anthony Towns got it. I play more than him. I'm more available. I'm a better defender than him. Why not? And not saying you got any kind of antagonistic relationship with Towns. I don't want anybody to think that's what I'm trying to say. Sure, he's just looking at comp wise. Why not me? Why can't I get that kind of money? And then from the Timberwolves, I'm like, you can't because we owe $100 million in your player option season already to Towns and Edwards. And that's two dudes that make $100 million together, almost like 98 and a half. But like, we have to be very careful. So this should be where it is. We should be starting to talk about, hey, that 46 million, we're going to double that, but we're going to double it over the course of 3 or 4 years. Probably 3, if we're being realistic. We're going to give you 90 million over 3 years, 30 million a year. Knock your number down. You're still taken care of. You got more money, but that gets stuck. But here's the other thing. Look just a few names down the list. There's Naz Reid sitting there. Yes. 1 year, 13.9 million. That's not an extendable. He's not extendable anyway because of when he signed his extension. So that's not going to happen. But he's going to opt out of that player option because he's worth more than $15 million. That's essentially a mid-level deal. He's going to make more than that. And if I'm the Timberwolves, then I got to be like, how much money can I tie up in 3 centers? I know they can play together. They can play almost any combination of the 2 of the 3 of them. But how much can I put on all 3 of these guys? My prediction is by this time next year, one of the 3 is not on the Timberwolves anymore. Somebody's gone. Somebody's moved in trade or just gone.
That's my read as well. I think that that's the likeliest outcome here is that in all likelihood, one of these guys is gone. I think that it probably makes the most sense for Naz to be the one that's gone because he would probably want a starting spot somewhere. And, by the end of the year, he'd probably have earned a starting role somewhere. But the Gobert one is interesting because 32 years old already, can hit free agency this year if he wants, after the season, if he wants to. That feels like a tricky situation for everyone to navigate right now. And I'm not totally sure where that lands. That's the other piece of this that is fascinating. And arguably, I would say probably the biggest reason why this has not happened. This is my guess. This is not me reporting. Do not aggregate this for the love of God. My guess is that the fact that the ownership situation seems unsettled is probably why this has not happened.
Yep.
Why there hasn't been able to like find a common ground here. Because look, I don't disagree with you that at 32 years old, going to be 33 next June when he'd be hitting free agency, that Rudy Gobert, probably is on the decline a little bit. But if I'm Rudy Gobert and I am his representation, I am coming off of a defensive player of the year season.
Yep.
And I'm thinking that I am good enough to do this, right? And I am good enough to be this guy moving forward. I keep myself in pristine shape. I am like one of the hardest workers in the NBA in terms of that. I don't know. I might be betting on myself a little bit better or a little bit.
And I would also say, when have you ever been this good and this sustainably good? Never. You've never had this kind of talent that is locked in like this. Do you really want to upset it? I also have to wonder too, and again, not reporting anything, Tim Connolly only extended through one more year. I wonder if there's a little bit of, hey, if we're going to greenlight you giving Gobert a new deal, you need to be here to see it out, to be able to, we need to pivot out of it. You need to be the one to do it. You can't lock us in all this and then be like, all right, I'm off to, wherever now to run their organization. And now we're sitting here with now at that point, 36-year-old Rudy Gobert at,
and no draft picks.
Yeah. And no draft picks because you traded them all for him. And now we're not quite as good. And Anthony Edwards is due for his next deal. And we're starting to hear chirping and all the other things that could happen with that. So yeah, you just got to be very cautious with how you build these out. But yeah, I would be hopeful. Let's try to go ahead and opt out. We're going to take care of you long term, but let's knock your number down. It doesn't have to be the Al Horford levels of where we're paying you $10 million a year, because that's crazy. But let's knock you down into the 30, 35 range, somewhere like that. And we all feel a little bit better about that, and we can all move forward with that.
The last stars here, and I don't really need to like dive too far into this. Jimmy Butler, it just seems like is going to play this year out, based off of the reporting. At least I'm not sitting here breaking that news. I'm saying that the reporting seems like he's just going to play the year out. Brandon Ingram, I mean, like that's been talked about ad nauseum. I don't know that I need to talk about it anymore.
Yep.
The Knicks with Julius Randle, and this is where we get into the Knicks section here in general. Mikal Bridges is not eligible to sign an extension for 3 more months, something like that.
Yeah, in that range. Yep.
So
from the trade.
Once he's eligible, you would think that there will be something that gets done there. I would imagine it's probably pretty similar to the OG Anunoby deal. That just kind of tracks in terms of all defense caliber guys who are capable of a little bit more, both on the same team. You probably don't want to upset the apple cart too much in either direction there.
Yep.
I believe he would be pretty close to eligible to that number. It might just be a little bit less.
It might be a little shy of it, but yeah. My guess is with Bridges, that contract's already printed and just sitting in a folder in a desk somewhere until it's time to put the date on it and let's go. Like that's like my guess is everybody knows where that one's going already.
Julius Randle is the other one with the Knicks. I mean, look, you probably want to play this out if I'm the Knicks too. Like maybe they'll do it if he's willing to take like a bit of a discount, but like he kind of took a bit of a discount coming off an all NBA season last time. I don't know that he would do that, but also like it's a tricky situation for him as well in terms of playing time, in terms of role on the team. I don't know what to expect there. That feels like one where everyone just kind of plays it out, right?
The last 4 guys we talked about in depth, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, Brandon Ingram, we kind of already talked about when we talked about Murphy and the Pelicans stuff. And then who is Jimmy Butler. Here's what I'm saying if I'm the teams. Who is paying you next summer if you opt out? Who's going to pay you? Because now, Sam, I only project, I openly own, it's the middle of September. This will change greatly by the time we get there. I only project 4 teams to have cap space, and none of them do I project to have 35% of the max cap space.
Yeah.
Sure, sign and trades can happen. But we saw teams get super cautious with stuff that hard capped them this year. Their teams are like, whether it's real or it's, I'm going to set a limit of I can't go there because that's how I can control my tax bill. Whether it's real fear or it's we're controlling spending and calling it real fear, teams are setting these markers of we can't go above this number in terms of team salary. We can't be locked in. So that becomes my question that I am asking those four guys. If I'm those front offices, look, I get it, but who else is offering you $35 million a year? Never mind 35% at 50 sub plus million a year. Who? Because the teams I project to have cap space are Brooklyn. They're not paying any of those. Those guys are all too old for them. Houston, probably not. I mean, maybe
Houston's the one where I can see
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler being of interest to them.
Yep. San Antonio, if things go really well this year and they're like, hey, adding a veteran makes sense for us because Wembanyama's only in year 3, but he's already like a 10-year vet production wise. Let's go. Yeah, maybe. And then Washington, and Washington's not paying anybody yet. It's way too early for them. So you have two teams that maybe two of the worst teams in the league next year in Washington and Brooklyn. And then you have Houston and San Antonio, who maybe, let's see, we already talked about Houston. They've got their own guys that they may want to take care of anyway. And that could wipe, if they take care of guys early, that wipes them out of the cap space. So that really starts to turn into a spot where if I'm these players, you got to be really, really careful. I'm not saying you just got to be like, fine, give me $25 million a year. Let's go. You just got to be careful because there's not going to probably be somebody sitting there. There's not going to be like Paul George knew I have teams that will give me a max. I know if I can't get it done with the Clippers, I have at a minimum Philly, maybe Orlando is in that mix. I have those teams. I just don't know that those teams exist next summer. We're just not kind of in that world right now.
Let's go to the vets real quick before we get you out of here. The big one that I want to talk about is Denver. Denver has Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. as extension eligible right now, sitting there. Both could be extended based off of their numbers. Michael Porter Jr., I can't imagine that there's much movement there in terms of wanting to add years to that contract. That just doesn't seem right to me. But Aaron Gordon's the one where it would make a lot of sense. He is at $22.8 million this year, and then has a $22.8 million player option for next year. I would imagine that he will decline that and will hit free agency because there's a lot more guaranteed money waiting on the table for him if he does hit free agency. Also, Denver can't lose Aaron Gordon. Just point blank. That would be a significant, substantial problem for them moving forward. If you now have Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and then questions, that team is probably not a title contender at this point.
Yep. Agreed.
I think that they need to get something done. I just don't know. I don't know if they'll pay for it. I truly am at the point with this front office. It's not the front office. It's more ownership to me. I wonder how hamstrung this front office is in terms of being able to, pay at the second apron level, pay at the level commensurate with, continuing to keep the players that help them win a title.
Yeah. If we were having this conversation 3 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, they'll pay KCP. They'll pay Gordon. Let the good times roll. We'll let tomorrow's problems be tomorrow's problems. We'll figure it out. We got Jokic. We got to do what we got to do. Now Caldwell Pope is gone. And I get there's been this stuff of they could have paid him, that they offered him the same as Orlando. I kind of, that doesn't hold a lot of water for me just because why would he have left then? Because Caldwell Pope's not like, well, I want to be the man somewhere, right? He didn't leave for those reasons. So I got to believe they weren't offering the exact same contract. Unless he was like, hey, I feel insulted by this. I'm out of here. I don't know. But with Gordon, at least with Caldwell Pope, you can be like, hey, we want to play Christian Brown more. We like Julian Strawther a lot. We like Peyton Watson. We think those guys can do some stuff. We're going to play all of them. Okay, fine. I guess that's not the end of the world. You don't have anybody to replace Aaron Gordon. I mean, I know I'm
wondering if they see Watson as the Gordon replacement.
Oh, man.
I'm
That's
not,
tough.
Keith,
Yeah,
I'm not saying that
maybe they do.
I
Sure.
believe that. I'm wondering if they see that as kind of where this is going.
It certainly could be. I think with Aaron Gordon, it's funny. Aaron Gordon simultaneously feels like he's been in the league for 15 seasons and also feels like he's still only 25 years old. Like, and I think that's just because I watched the entirety of his Orlando career up
Yeah.
close here in Orlando. So it's like I just have this weird like time vacuum with Aaron Gordon that I can't get out of. But
Right.
I like he's going to be 30. Like he's not a kid anymore. He's like one of the older players on the team of their real rotate. Well, I guess Westbrook is a real rotation guy this year, but of their like main kind of core guys, he's right there with Jokic age wise. If Aaron Gordon says, "Hey, give me something that averages 30 to 35 million, done, sign it, done, get out of here, and off we go." Like that's easy decision for me. I'm not even gonna think twice about it if I'm right in that range. Maybe the Nuggets kind of key here is we can only offer you 140% of what you make right now, which that would be, that could be their
Like
kind of saving grace of
or
like,
so,
hey, we can't do that.
33.
Yeah, I'm gonna run it right now for you.
Yeah.
31.9. So if they're like, hey, we can only
Wow.
give you 32 million, and he's like, okay, that's enough. Because also, I think Aaron Gordon also has fully realized, and I've heard him kind of talk about how much he values playing in Denver and playing with Jokic and competing. I don't know that Aaron Gordon is like, I need to maximize every last penny I can get. I think he's seen, I know what it looks like when I'm somewhere that doesn't play this way and isn't very good. I spent the first half of my career like that. Yeah, I'll stay here for really good money and we'll make it work and figure it out.
Yeah, so Aaron Gordon, will have made $155 million already in his career by the end of this season. If they tear up that player option and say, hey, we'll give you, 3 years, 90 million, I think that kind of tracks for everybody involved, if I'm being honest. It truly, though, I think that makes sense for everybody. If Denver ownership was to say, like, I'm sure with Denver's front office, with Calvin Booth and everybody involved there, Tommy Valsettis, like all of the guys in their front office, I'm sure that they would love to do Aaron Gordon at whatever number they're able to do Aaron Gordon at.
Sure.
And that doesn't come from intel. That comes from me speculating entirely on how good Aaron Gordon is and that he's worth more than that number. I'm not sitting here saying that like that, again, do not aggregate that. But I'm saying that that's, a real question of ownership there now in terms of money. And I would be interested to know, will ownership continue to pony up for this roster? That's what it comes down to for me. If they are willing to, then great. If they're not, then they should be, this ownership group should be, really hammered if they were to let Aaron Gordon go this summer, because that is pretty egregious.
This is not a ownership group that is sometimes every once in a while you get a couple in there. It's like, I kind of get why they can't lock into, $500 million in taxes and roster penalties. Not the Cronkies. They're fine. They're fine. They are more than fine to pay, whatever it takes. I kind of wonder if it's like, we got our title. Like we're good for a while. Like we can live off that. And that's, that's, I get it, but that's not, if I'm the fans, I would start. If Aaron Gordon walks next summer and it's for any reason other than Peyton Watson is awesome and is ready, or Deron Holmes recovered really well, we think he's going to step right in and be our starting guy, or we're going to slide Porter Jr. up, unless it's for any reason other than we've got the guy already in place to replace him. That's, to me, now you've shed too much out the door, and that's just not okay. And then I start to wonder, I don't think Jokic is ever going to be the guy who's like, I want to trade. But I wonder if Jokic starts looking at it at the end of his current contract, is like, I'm 34 years old. I don't need to do this anymore. I'm going home. Like I don't,
so like, I don't think he's going to do that, but like, I think
would,
that, like, I do wonder, like, I think that guy wants to compete. Like that guy, for all the things that people think about Jokic, like that dude does want to compete. A few quick names: Alex Caruso. We're all assuming that that's something that can get done pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so, because I don't think Caruso is like, I need to max out a ton of money again. They're a little hamstrung. They can't offer him a ton, but they're going to get within the range of the mid-level, and I think that's enough for Alex Caruso. I think he'll feel fine with that.
Yeah, Caruso about to turn 31 this season, has already made about, let's see here. He's only made like 40
Not that
million
much, yeah.
in his career. Yeah.
Yep.
So, he might want to, get up there, but I can't imagine that Oklahoma City would offer him less than like 70 million. And I would think they'd probably offer him the max of what he can make.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think they probably go to, this is what we can offer you. Is this enough?
Yeah.
If it isn't, then all right, hey, here's what we're going to give you. We're not even day one of free agency, because you're our guy. We can talk to you early. Whenever the day after the finals ends, here's what we're offering. Are you good? All right, let's go.
The only thing there would be, I would imagine they probably want a team option of some sort on the last season, given that he would be 35 or 36 at that point.
And there have been injury issues too. So yeah, you want to protect yourself. But my guess is for him, he's like, yeah, that's fine. I think for him at this point, it's more, I want to be in a winning situation.
The Portland guys, DeAndre Ayton, Anthony Simons, Rob Williams, I'm just kind of assuming that they're not going to do anything there, because DeAndre, they just drafted Donovan Clingan. Anthony Simons, they have all these guards already, Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp. I would imagine they want to see where that goes. And then Rob Williams, just the injury history. You can't do anything there.
Yeah,
I would imagine that tracks for you.
Simons, if he's traded somewhere else, becomes a far more interesting extension conversation to me. Just because he's already at 20 plus million. So I could see something getting done, but not with Portland. I don't think with Portland, those make any sense.
That feels right. Wendell Carter is a fascinating one with Orlando. Again, though, kind of a low number to extend off of, which makes it a little bit tricky.
Yep.
I kind of assume the number is too low to extend off of, if I'm being honest.
I think so. I think for Carter, he's probably going to look at it and say, you know what, let me see. He's got 2 years left. Let me see what that looks like at the end of the 2 years. And I think for the Magic, they're probably gonna make, let's see what it looks like for us too. Like, do we really feel comfortable with Goga or Isaac moving forward even more at the 5, or have we moved into another option at that point?
Yep. So Wendell Carter makes $10.8 million in 2025-26. So the max number he can make is like 15 million, 15.5 million or so off of that number to start. Moving forward. So that just doesn't track at all to me as an extendable number. Bobby Portis, if Milwaukee wouldn't do something with Bobby Portis, that wouldn't surprise me. Sure. Just always take care of your guys. They've taken care of quite a few guys there. That wouldn't, be surprising to me. Terrence Mann with the Clippers, 1 year left this season. 15, I think, would be about the number that he can start at, right? Like something in that ballpark.
Yep.
If
already got one deal done with him already. Sure. Yeah, maybe. Could see another one.
Yeah. The last guy that we're going to talk about here, Dorian Finney-Smith. We talked about this before the show. I kind of wonder if this is not in regard to the Nets extending Dorian Finney-Smith. I can't imagine that would happen. But if you're a team trading for Dorian Finney-Smith, it might be nice to be able to extend him before the end of the season. So I wonder if the Lakers would want to do a Dorian Finney-Smith deal, or if somebody else, like a contender that has like a good roster set long-term, would want to do a Dorian Finney-Smith deal. I do wonder if we see that earlier in the season, potentially, where a team says, look, we will give you the little bit extra juice that you need in order to do a deal here. And then, get a deal done. Maybe there's like that little bit of extra reasoning there. And then a team extends him by the end of this season. Maybe I could see.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple key things. One point just for education for folks is anybody who has more than 2 years left, or more than 1 year left, rather, so 2 or more years, you have to get the extension done before opening night. So in Dorian Finney-Smith's case, if he wants to opt in for the 25-26 season, he would have to get it done before opening night. If he's okay with saying, I'm going to decline that player option, which then puts me on an expiring deal, then he could extend all the way through June 30th, which we've seen happen time and time again. The recent example, that was Drew Holiday, did that with the Celtics. He had 2 years left, but then he wiped out his player option, and then he extended right before the playoffs started. So I could see a world. I'm 100% in agreement with you. The Nets aren't extending him. The Nets are looking to get off of any salary they can right now that isn't involved with guys they signed directly or young players. So they're not doing it. But yeah, if you trade him to another team, if I was another team, I would be looking at it. The other thing is, I don't know how many people fully realize Dorian Finney-Smith is 31 already. He's been in the league for 8 years. So he's a guy who is a little bit older. So I think if you were able to get him on a deal that is, hey, we're going to give you 3 years, that is a little bit more meaningful to a guy like him than some of these other guys we've talked about who are in their like mid to late 20s. Because those guys are like, I have contracts coming after that. For Finney-Smith, it's like, okay, yeah, give me 3 more years. I'm good with that. I can roll forward with that. And then it becomes, where does he go? What does their cap sheet look like moving forward? How quick can they pivot and reset to something different? Those would be all the questions I would be asking. But yeah, I'll be shocked if he's a net come trade deadline time. I'd be stunned.
That would be pretty staggering. That just like wouldn't make any sense. I mean, like there are other names here: Norman Powell, Larry Nance, Duncan Robinson. CJ McCollum is theoretically extension eligible right now. I mean, I can't envision that being a thing. Collin Sexton might actually be one name that like could be a thing. Utah, like if he was to come out and play really, really well, Utah could use somebody like Collin Sexton.
They do, and they do some different stuff there in Utah.
Yeah, like I could see a world where Collin Sexton gets like a couple of years added on at like a relatively solid number. If he just wants more money, right? Just make sure he ends up locking in solid money. He made like a 4-year, $74 million deal last time, and was a top 10 pick. So probably be right around that $100 million range in terms of what he's made by the end of this year, or by the end of this deal. But it's just kind of dependent on what someone like that would want. Does he want to keep playing in Utah? Is everybody happy with that? I'd imagine Utah's kind of happy with it. He played awesome by the end of last year. It's just,
I've always liked Collin Sexton. I thought he got an unfair rap in Cleveland of people were like, this is just a good stats, bad team guy. And I was always like, he's efficient though. He's not.
That's
just
kind of the
scoring.
thing, yeah.
Like he's actually okay. Like he makes his shots. He doesn't turn it over a ton. Like what he is he's an undersized 2 guard. But I think everybody's kind of like, okay, that's fine. And where the NBA is now, teams play multiple ball handlers together all the time. It's okay. Here's my thing with Utah though. I said this today on our episode of Front Office Show today. We did one big question for each team in the Northwest Division, and I went back to. Probably a little old for you, Sam. It's honestly a little old for me. But the song by The Clash, should I stay or should I go? Because
there we go.
Other than Lauri Markkanen, I don't know who the heck's going to be on this Utah team.
Yeah, totally.
You could tell me they packaged together 4 of the kids out of the last 2 drafts and go get a really good veteran player because they can. And the opportunity cost is there. Okay, sure. Why not? You could tell me they trade everybody except for the kids in Markkanen because he can't be traded. Okay, sure. Yeah, none of these things are going to surprise me. I covered the Celtics through the second Danny Ainge rebuild, where one of the seasons I was covering them was they seemed like they should have put name tags on everybody. And they had a revolving door at the front of the facility because I think they made 7 trades in the span of 2 months, including trading 4 and then trading guys away in the same week multiple times. Not one of those ones where it's like we got them just to guys actually came in, played a game or 2, and then got traded like 2 games later. Brandon Wright, Jameer Nelson. Like it was bonkers. And I just know how Danny Ainge works. He is constantly open to, does this make us a little bit better or put us towards a path to being a lot better later? Done. Go. I'm going to make the trade now. So other than Markkanen, because he can't be traded, I don't think anybody should. I hope they all rent in Utah because I would not feel comfortable buying a place.
Yeah, that's the other thing about Sexton. If you extend him, then can't be moved for 6 months. That's a really good point. So yeah. I mean, look, I do this podcast with Bryce half the time, and I'll bring up music like Oasis, and I can't tell if Bryce is too old or too young for it. Like, it's Kansas. Like, music didn't make it to Kansas, so I'm glad we're at least referencing bands like The Clash here. Keith, again, thank you. This took longer than what I wanted to hold you for.
That's what happens
solid
when I get
2
on a
hours.
podcast and start talking contracts and wind
I
me up
loved
and go.
This was great. This is fantastic. Again, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on with you.
Yeah, you saw we pulled up the Spotrac sheets multiple times. Sam did throughout the course of the show. That's where our work is. You can find all my written work there at Spotrac as well. I have a lot of stuff coming there. We get a lot of things kind of in the works. It's Sam is very well aware at this time of year. A lot of it is just about timing things because it's like I don't want to put it all out there now and then sit here for 2 weeks with nothing to do. So we're just timing some stuff out, getting some things figured out, and then I have our show, NBA front office show, Trevor Lane and I, right now we're going about 3 times a week. But once the season really once training camps open, we'll be 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We break everything down. Anytime there's a major transaction, we go live as quick as the two of us can get to microphones, and we break it all down. We'll be live for trade deadline day, usually several hours. We have a lot of fun over there. We have a blast. It's we get a little silly. We just like to have fun. I fully understand the world I picked in the NBA of salary cap and contracts can be very dry. So I try to make it educational and fun. My background is in education. So I try that's what I want to do is I want to be that fun teacher. Everybody's like, I kind of hated the subject, but I like the class because I like the teacher. That's where I want to come away with this. So hopefully, people had fun tonight and you'll have fun if you check out our show too.
Go check out their show. It is a very good time. Every time that I see it, I enjoy it. It's super enjoyable. Go follow Keith's work. Go follow Trevor as well. Trevor_Lane over on Twitter.
It's a lot of Lakers because that's what his other job is, but we'll forgive him for that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. We've got Lakers, we got Celtics with Keith. The whole thing is all over the map. Yeah. Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We'll be back on Sunday with Bryce, and we will talk about stuff. Who knows? We'll figure out what we're going to talk about over the course of the next couple of days. Until next time, we'll talk soon.